Welcome to our webinar, exploring the relationship between supply chain management and CPQ, configure, price, quote. First of all, very pleased to introduce myself. My name is Chris Gates, and I lead the sales and marketing team within InspireXT, which is a global consulting firm. But I'm going to hand over to my friend Kuldeep Thakur to introduce himself and talk briefly about what is supply chain management.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Ingmar. My name is Kuldeep Thakur. Of course, you know me, but just generally about InspireXT. InspireXT is a global firm. We are in the business of making our customers successful. We do that by helping them connect their front office commerce operations with their supply chain operations, and to help become more customer-centric. We do that by using modern technologies such as Oracle, Salesforce, AI, and generally the goal is to enhance their efficiencies and cash flows. In terms of supply chain, what it is, it's an important part of any business, right? So it's essentially to do with how an organization ideates, how it builds products and services, how it sources them, how it transacts with other businesses, and how generally they put together a value chain in the service of their customers. And I am really excited that we're working with Ingmar and his team at Walpole to address that gap that sometimes or most often exists. We'll talk a little later about.
That's a great segue to Ingmar. Ingmar, would you be willing to just introduce yourself, Walpole Partnership, and the area of configure, price, quotation, please?
Absolutely. No, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Kuldeep, both of you, for having me here today. Walpole is very much excited to explore the further partnership between our two companies, as Walpole is a specialist consultancy in the domain of CPQ, configure, price, quote, and that already since 2013. We are very much a global reach, small consultancy company. Why? Because of that focus on CPQ, but our initial and prime focus is on Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We are headquartered out of the UK, and myself, I'm based out of Brussels in Belgium. Now, as we believe very strongly in our partnership here between InspireXT and Walpole, it's because there is a lot of gain still to be made for a lot of customers in both these domains and combining them, and that is really where we seek configure, price, and quote to dovetail perfectly into the SCM supply chain management process. And just for avoidance of doubt, so yes, the wonderful acronym around CPQ is firstly around configuring products and services and solutions, and most CPQ technologies, such as the ones from Oracle and Salesforce, they love complexity, right? That's where CPQ works best. And as that complexity gets through the offering of the portfolio of products and services and solutions, pricing becomes equally challenging. Therefore, the P of CPQ that makes pricing generally available as a generic price, but also on bespoke pricing, bespoke geographies, bespoke logic that sits behind it for the P of pricing. And then that all needs to be translated as far as a configuration with the price is concerned into an actual quote or a quotation or a transaction, which is really then focused on piecing an offer together to a customer, in an output document that can take many ways, shapes, or forms. As far as a proposal is concerned, a contract is concerned, a statement of work can be concerned, and anything like that, or a full set of terms and conditions that will guide the actual quotation. So yeah, that already in itself has got its specialty, but then linking it to supply chain management is really what we believe is making a flywheel really fly.
That's great. Thank you, Ingmar. And that's what I'd like to explore with you now, Kuldeep. I mean, we talk about creating customer-centric supply chains. Within the concept of a customer-centric supply chain, what's the role of a CPQ solution to improve the quote and order accuracy in that supply chain program?
As Ingmar said, I think the configuration, the price, the quote, of course, all of those terms are deeply embedded in supply chain. Supply chain, whether it is production, whether it is fulfillment, whether it is logistics, all those things that we promise to the customer, they have to be kept consistently through that entire value chain. And typically what happens is that as you go from the customer requirements down to fulfillment, that complexity only increases, because then you have other partners where some of those requirements will need to be addressed. If you're a contract manufacturer, you still, as the business, hold fuller contract with your customer. If you are trading, just buying, selling, you may have regulatory requirements that are essential. So having a well-crafted quotation system plays a significant role in that sort of meeting the customer requirement. And customer-centric supply chain essentially then means that not only do you meet the customer requirement, you meet that in time, you meet it from a regulatory compliance standpoint, you meet it from a financial requirement standpoint, you meet it from customers requirement standpoint. And it's a term that usually mistaken to be just taking an order and shipping it and that's it. But it's much more than that. And I find that the quote functionality, so to speak, is almost like the brain of that simplification of all this value chain. Um, Most people would think of quote as an object that is there to give a price. That's it. But it is not. It is actually the very link between how you inferred the customer requirement, how you structured your supply chain down the line, and essentially holding that very thin thread sometimes that can make or break a relationship, not just with your customer, but also in your departments across your silos that end up creating. So bringing them all together, that's where I see the value of this in a customer-centric or that vision of becoming a customer-centric supply chain.
And if you allow me, perhaps just to compliment, I could obviously I couldn't agree more. It's very well summarized, which is not easy, Kuldeep. So thank you for doing that. And I particularly, in the light of CPQ, think of as a accurate scope of supply, right? Which is really where also sometimes CPQ sells itself short, because that handshake, right, between CPQ and supply chain is often around the scope of supply. We just completed a major go live for an Oracle CPQ cloud customer called Nidec. They sell motors and drive solutions all over the world. And this exactly is what they are after. They want to take the errors out of anything to do with their scope of supply, so that they don't hand over the keys of the kingdom to the customer by saying, oh yeah, generally we have quoted you for this and we have fulfilled your order, and then the customer says, yeah, but this was not exactly what was promised to me, right? So that kind of the identification of the exact scope of supply that is run by the supply chain in order to fulfill it and to provide that value to a customer. I think that is exactly where the value lies between these two big domains of CPQ and supply chain.
I want to just hone in on one area of that, Ingmar, for a minute. We obviously see supply chains getting more dynamic, leaner, and more complex. And I understand the goal, the sort of holy grail, is really to try and get to this real-time CPQ data. So how have you seen in some of your client engagements, organizations looking to really harness that real-time CPQ data against their production planning and logistics activities?
Yeah. No, again, it's a great question in that context, because it makes customers think about where is that connection, right? Okay, if we say the connection, should happen in real time, that's obviously always the, kind of the nec plus ultra. It's the ultimate goal to get there. It doesn't need to be real time all the time, right? But it can serve the business at the customer side of combining configure, price, quote elements with real-time data, particularly from the supply chain, very, very well. That is true. And that is a challenge both on its technical merit. Obviously we all say everything in the cloud, please, and open API standards and all of that good, wonderful technical stuff, which always sounds a lot easier than it is. But the technology is there, can be done, and you have specialist teams from both of our organizations that will absolutely make those integrations work. But also you need to think of the functional challenges, right, that come with that kind of real-time data integration, because what's the scope for it? For each of the acronym letters, CP and Q, I can think of plenty of use cases. We have a wonderful industrial manufacturing customer called Somfy. They're headquartered in the south of France, but they operate worldwide. They do all home automation systems, as well as big buildings. They do the wonderful blinds that sit at the outside of buildings, and they're automating those with their motors. And they, from day one in their CPQ project, were keen to make a real-time call, to their financial system and linked to their inventories about what is available, the famous available to promise functionality, coupled with and at what price indeed am I currently letting this customer order, or this distributor order this solution or equipment for. So those are very early on real-time data integrations related to the P, right, of pricing. But yeah, you can think of many more other use cases where all that real-time data is really, really interesting and important to craft the value between CPQ and supply chain.
And if we flip that around, Kuldeep, and think about from a sort of production scheduling and logistics perspective, what can the supply chain and operations team do differently with a closer integration between CPQ and their supply chain management systems?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot. We have a customer, we are talking to them around this. The one very simple example would be that somebody promised a date. Customer now has promised something somewhere else. That changes about 2-3 times before it hits the order hits the production flow. And you can imagine the impact of that disruption, not just for the manufacturer who is promising these dates, but the ultimate consumers of the order. So that's just one very simple but very profound impact of having that accuracy and understanding the implications of those promises that are being made. But it's also to do with what goes in making those promises, that people's understanding evolves with that objective. So as I was touching on earlier, that CPQ, or the court holding sort of the brain functions of the entire value chain in this case, in this example, what ends up happening is that a lot of that knowledge base starts to reside in, not in the system, but then it resides in those individual performing teams or people, or internally or externally. And the scaling of your production, the scaling of your manufacturing operations is then completely constrained, because you can't move anything from one work center to the other, from one area to the other, from one plant to the other. This casing point, essentially, I was referring to, if there is a shutdown happening in a certain geography or certain area, certain plant, how do you transition that frictionlessly to other parts proactively, or at least with a little delay? Those things become challenging, and then the only answer is delays, and the only answer is somebody getting impacted somewhere, and um, it's becoming a norm that we start to accept that that's probably the only way we can become, you know, we can deliver. So those are some of the issues in production planning. I think clearly all of this then leads to what we call as the most important objective of any business, which is a cash flow to survive, to sustain, to run, to drive investments. And that cycle is a vicious cycle, unfortunately, that once you get into it, you start to put more and more headcount into it to try to just remember what was promised and what was to be done. That's an opportunity, I suppose, by just saying we want to be customer centric. Where do we start? Start with the most important connection that is driving a promise.
Very good. Now, all of our clients clearly want to be customer centric. They want to have accurate quotes. They want to have timely execution of their quotation process. They want to have minimal stock holdings and full-time fulfillment in full. But what are some of the challenges we've seen when integrating CPQ billing with supply chain systems? Maybe Ingmar, if you can give us.
Absolutely, and it's a good follow-on remark, even from where Kuldeep kind of finished his last sentence, because it's how we see particularly some of the change management aspects of this. Because yes, CPQ, the quoting, the selling, the servicing, and then the supply chain aspects. And we often see with customers that there's a lot of siloed mechanisms, teams, people, functions, right, that really don't connect. And that is where lots of value is lost, right? Because if the handshake between those isn't working, then you're going to be stuck. And the most important aspect in that is that whenever you say CPQ and supply chain management, it is very much a cross-functional challenge that needs to be solved. It is not something that only sales or service or fulfillment is going to deal with. We need to deal with this across in the whole value chain. And I think that around a customer centricity approach is something that organizations, as you say, Chris, they strive for. But we want to make this perfect, with a wonderful customer satisfaction score at the end of all the services and solutions we provide. What they often forget is that also the employee satisfaction that needs to sit below that, that fuels that end-to-end process, and that the handshakes are happening at the right time. This can really, we see it nearly in every organization, every customer I work with, has to be taken very, very seriously. Otherwise, we as InspireXT and Walpole can come up with the perfect technology solution, and maybe it's not worth that much unless it's actually being carried by the teams that need to operate them.
And Chris, if you may allow, just to add to what Ingmar articulated, I think just as in terms of the systems and architectures, one trend I've seen over the years is that CPQ starts to become the all and all scenario, that it is a master data system, it's a transactional system, it's a system within its own right, can do everything. And by the way, most systems that are built purposefully can do a little bit of everything, right? But they're not meant to do everything of everything. So, for example, for a good quote to be given to a customer, a meaningfully curated product portfolio or catalog with all its restrictions, all its compatibilities is a key. So is the price, so is the date, so is the stock. And organizations sometimes have right intentions to provide a quote, but do not have the time nor the guidance that what is the right way to go about it. And then it ends up becoming a CPQ project. I typically say do some bit of common process modeling discussion, some sort of a common thread of how do I get a single view of product? How do I get a single view of stock? And you don't need to do massive projects around that. You could do a lot of that using your existing infrastructure. But just the blueprint, just the mindset that I will have single source of product. It doesn't matter where it is in the organization. So I'm going to invest time in understanding that data model. And that's one example, for example. So you kind of have that change management aspect linked with technology, linked with what your customer want. I think you could achieve a lot with just putting CPQ together with that, bringing supply chain together, bringing this commonality of all these different systems. Because you know no single organization nowadays runs on one single ERP. Right? They all have multiple of them, and of course, biggest ERP of the world, Ingmar will testify, is sheet. So all that need to come together, and the objective is not to replace them. The objective is to utilize them so that you have a better code in the end.
And maybe I to really latch on to what you say, Kuldeep, it is like in very specific use cases sometimes that the value can be found. It's like it's the traditional first step of the 1,000-mile journey. It's like find in a customer organization, find a use case where you see the connection quite readily. I name one from that comes to mind immediately for one of my major chemical manufacturing companies that operates out of Oslo in Norway. And they had to tackle one particular use case, which was around framework agreements and continuous fulfillment of orders that sit on the back of it.
Yeah.
And this is such a wonderful use case because it combines the forces of the framework agreement, the quotes that come with it, the available to promise potential, and then call off orders that are coming in electronically that immediately hit, the supply chain route and the fulfillment routes. And that, as a use case, is a wonderful eye-opener for a customer to understand, okay, we should really be combining efforts and not seeing them in isolation anymore, because that's where the value will be.
Absolutely.
That's a great example, Ingmar. Thank you. Kuldeep, from your experience, have you got any examples where you've seen it the other way, where they started in the supply chain and then managed to successfully integrate into a CPQ platform?
I have certainly seen the objectives and some drives about it, but I think it's the environment that sort of decides, right? So what ends up happening is that if you're opening new channels, if you're taking your products to multiple different channels and markets, you have a fully fine-tuned, or let's say near fine-tuned supply chain operations. Now you just want more demand into it, then you want that ability to be given to a lot more people, like the channel revenue and those kind of things. And of course, you go from the supply chain angle into it to create that frictionless interactions. But it all boils down to what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to improve the production process, or are you trying to increase your share? Are you trying to just remove the errors? I think that's where it starts. Essentially, what is the driving action? And a lot of the customers, they just want to expand geographically, and they can't open satellite service stations where there's a customer service, there's a lot of human interaction. So you enable this self-service on online or on third parties infrastructure, and you want to offer them the infrastructure that is plug and play, so that when the demand comes in, then you're not creating more silos that can affect whatever else you're trying to do. So I've seen that happening typically in a more make to stock scenario as well, where your product portfolios are not very I mean, let's say they don't need too much of a configuration. But I think both examples exist. I mean, upstream and downstream.
That's fine. Let's take a moment and just look forward. In terms of the trends that we see in the domains of CPQ and supply chain management, what are some of the things that you're seeing, both the vendors and the clients and overall the market moving towards? Maybe Ingmar, if you could go first.
Yeah, sure. And the easy one is obviously artificial intelligence and Gen AI, right? That comes with it, and it's always a fun conversation around that, because it looks like it's a new term, but obviously it isn't. All based on kind of machine learning and early artificial intelligence, which was already embedded in. It's particularly also in CPQ about 15 years ago. It's now turned into, for good reason, into a topic itself. Why? Because with the arrival, right, of the large language models, the LLMs, and then putting that together with masses of data, which obviously we definitely have between us, right, from a CPQ and a supply chain focus area perspective is concerned, then if you put them together, you get insights that human beings wouldn't even be able to think of, right? So that is where generative AI in particular is going to play also a very instrumental role in our CPQ and supply chain management journey. But we don't have to go that far. New business models, servitization, right? So turning everything into a even equipment and services business. And here I think of a big industrial manufacturer of medical equipment who is stopping to sell MRI scanners and what they, with services and supplies and everything that come with it. But what they start to sell is the utilization, right, of their MRI scanner in a particular hospital for a particular patient. And moving to such a model, well, you need IoT, Internet of Things. You need sensors. You need data that's being collected. So at least you have some idea of how many patients are being scanned in that MRI piece of equipment, and whether it's functioning properly, and that let it transmit information directly back to your technology system landscape, so that you know how to intervene, how to interact, that you provide preventative maintenance services, that you do the fulfillment of any replenishment orders of spare parts that come with such contracts, around subscription management and the like. So these are big aspects, again, where CPQ and supply chain are closely coupled hand in hand to support these new business models with all latest technology available to it.
Thank you. And Kuldeep, how about you, from a sort of direction, where are you seeing the supply chain market moving towards?
Very similar, of course. Everybody's talking about AI, so largest volumes of data nowadays residing behind the enterprise sort of ecosystem are still, I think, not candidates that have been explored due to security reasons. So I think there's a lot of focus in trying to harnessing that data and creating conversations and insights. So that's clearly a sought after area, harder to do. also riskier one to embrace, but everybody wants to do it. So that's one trend that we are working on and we are seeing. But I think in the context of this CPQ and supply chain, of course, there's a lot more that can be done once we start to solve some of those questions. And I touched on this expansion of channels, so to speak. And the question has always been that what does expanding a channel mean? Does it mean equal amount of human capital investment, equal amount of technology investment? And with all those are palatable ways to go about. But with all those, there's a lead time, there's the error issues, there are um, geographical limitations that you cannot come over or overcome in a short space of time. And that's where I think offering more and more self-service CPQ capabilities that are deeply entrenched and embedded with your operational capabilities starts to look like a business case that everybody should go after. But very fewer people are able to explore that. So that's the discussion I've had with one of our customers, that how do I go from my in-house, 100 salespeople to thousands of salespeople that I could be tapping into in the market by productizing that knowledge in such a way that they're able to support our customers that otherwise just gets clogged in a way of our capacity essentially. So those are some of the trends that we think this is essentially going to give benefit.
Thank you. And look, we're just coming into close. Just finally, both of you speak with a lot of passion about this topic. I'm curious as to why this is an area you're so passionate about. Well, maybe you could start.
The passion for these topics, certainly for me individually has been spurred because of the background, not just as a consultant, but particularly also because I walked in our customer shoes. I still to today, although I've been a consultant already for nearly over a decade, I always reflect back on all the use cases we actually get to see, and I think of them as if I was sitting at the customer side. And I have been, I have been a corporate enterprise officer for 15 years prior to becoming a consultant. And I think understanding what this means for customer organizations is what makes me, what drives me in the passion to find solutions and at least try and understand first of really what those requirements are. Kuldeep spoke about that very wisely. He said, this is not about us pushing a solution forward. This is about us understanding where the requirements really are, within modern day technology and within so fast, dynamic, moving industrial and economic and climate environment. So I think that's where the passion comes from, because it's never the same, right? It's always specific, and it's always provides a value that is not exactly similar to any other customer. So that's where I think the passion comes from.
Excellent. How about you, Kuldeep? What gives you your kind of fire for this?
Well, it's quite personal, of course, as Ingmar said. But for me, just as a very simple concept about traceability, so to speak. So I started my career in pharma, and I think the traceability is almost ingrained in everything or anything that I've done, and um, I feel going in front of a customer and helping them identify what this whole value chain does and how it traces back to customer requirements. Everybody thinks they know it. I think I know it, but I think every time you have an interaction, you find something really new. Is all of us are in this business to make somebody successful, so that we can be successful. That's essentially what it is, right? So it's not other way around. It's not about me becoming first successful and then. So in order to be able to support somebody to be successful, we need to understand what is that X and what is that drive. And um, all throughout my career, all throughout my professional journey, I think I have found that if I can connect dots, that may be a success for somebody. And that dot is manifested in this relationship that you've very beautifully architected, Chris, for us. But also in general, every transaction that we are doing, every interaction we are doing, we're just trying to find out what is that input and what's that output, and are they harmoniously sort of connected by somebody? If not, then can we be the people that bring that to the fore and make somebody successful? And I think this relationship, in fact, is also working like that. So we're trying to leverage each other's strengths to make somebody successful together.
And how does that relationship work in practice?
I feel the values, the objectives are aligned. We have come far with that shared vision that we have something to offer that is of value to customer, and that is why we are able to spend the time we've been able to spend so far in this relation, because we've started believing in it more than anybody else, and that's been manifested with Ingmar and his team's willingness to help us understand our openness to talk about supply chain and find those kind of nuggets of value for customers and partners like Oracle and Salesforce. I'm actually very excited and positive about this shaping into a longer term relationship.
That's great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. If I just summarize what I've heard today, both the supply chain and CPQ are kind of established domains, but really the opportunity to bring them together helps us connect that front office to the back office to help the quotation and the sales process have an accurate view of the inventory and the true supply chain, and helping organizations execute it at lower cost and at more accuracy, and ultimately a higher client satisfaction. But it sounds like some real challenges about doing them, which are as much around defining the problem and the change management as they are around the technology, and the technology can come together. And as we move forward, we're looking to bring the best of the best, both in terms of the people and the technologies together to help our clients on that roadmap. Even if it starts very pragmatically with maybe one use case and some string and brown paper to hold it together just to get it up and running, and then evolve that sophistication over time. And really, I think the opportunity around the AI and the capabilities that are coming there to help organizations have better insight and answer better questions around how do I successfully satisfy that customer demand at a lower cost and a more efficient way of operation is really quite exciting. And we look forward to hearing more stories in the months to come in terms of where we've been able to successfully do that. Thank you, Ingmar. Thank you, Kuldeep.
Thank you both.
Soon.
Bye for now.
Okay, bye.